Welcome to Mirrors into Windows, a podcast by Global Teaching Partners, an official Bridge USA designated organization. I'm Amy Corwin.
And I'm Dante Johnson. Together we dive into education from every angle, transforming reflections into opportunities and uncovering strategies that will help us look beyond the classroom walls.
Our goal is to connect educators from around the world, bringing you conversations, insights, and stories that will shift perspectives and ignite meaningful change. Because when mirrors become windows, the possibilities are endless.
Whether you're navigating life as an international teacher or searching for new ways to enhance your practice, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration, collaboration, and a richer understanding of the global classroom.
This time of year, it is almost a given that each teacher is getting ready to burn out.
Yeah.
They're tired.
Yeah.
And we brought along a very special guest today to talk about this really important topic, because what we want is you not to burn out.
Right.
So I think we can share some good stuff today that will really help you kind of make it through to that last part of the year. And so I'm super excited to have on the show not only our Director of Educator Success, but our very good friend, Ashley McRae.
Woo! I feel so
Super
special to be here
knowledgeable
with y'all today. Thank you for having me.
You are
It is an
welcome.
honor. I guess I should introduce myself.
Yes, please
Okay,
tell our
just a
listeners
little bit.
about yourself.
All right. So my name is Ashley McRae. I have been with Global almost 4 years, but before being with Global, I was an educator. That doesn't leave you, stays with you forever. But I taught 3rd and 4th grade for a couple years, about 4 or 5 years, before transitioning to being a school counselor, not guidance, school. If you ever need to know, there is a difference. That's right, Dante. Was a school counselor for 2 years. And then my principal tapped me during a learning walk that we were doing, and he's like, McRae, I know you love being a counselor, but I think you'd be a really great academic coach. So ended up doing that. Did a little dabbling with MTSS, 504s, and y'all know all the acronyms in school. So, and then stumbled upon Global and been here ever since. So
Nice.
Love it here.
Well, look, we're so glad to have you on the show. And I knew if you just listened to all of those accolades that you have a wealth of knowledge to share. And I'm sure there has been a time or two in your career where you have felt this idea of being burned out. I mean, it can be defined as like chronic stress that really leads to some physical and emotional exhaustion. You start to feel that kind of detachment, that kind of feeling of just complete ineffectiveness. A survey by Gallup in 2022 reported that over 44% of teachers report feeling burned out, and making teaching just one of the most stressful professions in this day and age. Kind of helping you to see the signs, right? Looking for that emotional fatigue, that loss of motivation, that joy in teaching. Maybe you're getting more irritable, detached from your students or your colleagues. But we really, really want you to be able to see that, normalize it, and then find practical ways to overcome it. Because we've talked about this lots week after week in our podcast. Teaching is still one of the most valuable professions in the world, and our students need you. And so we need you to be healthy. We need you to be strong. And we really need you not to burn out. So I hope you can learn a lot today because this is a really good topic.
Yeah. It's so good to have you, Ashley.
Well, I'm happy to be here. You know, it's nice to be here with y'all in this capacity.
I mean, Amy and I were just so excited, and we knew we were going to talk about burnout, right, Amy? And we knew the right person to get for this.
Oh my
because
gosh. The pressure, Dante.
Well, because it's your experience, and you kind of named some, but I feel especially, I have an affinity for mental health, and I feel like this is definitely connected. And so you and I have had discussions, and you've had discussions with all of us, about different things that some of our teachers experience. I'm just curious for the first question to kind of dig into a little bit, just you to expound upon your experience with burnout yourself, because we've been there.
Yep.
But then also, since we've been there, we've been able to help support others who are there. So if you can look at both angles, from your experience to help it from you being burned out, but then helping a teacher felt burnt out.
Right. I think the first incident that I can remember that comes to mind. I talked about transitioning from being a teacher to a counselor, right? Mm-hmm. And in North Carolina, in order to become a school counselor, you have to have a graduate degree. So I had to go back to school.
Right.
I don't know if I was planning on doing that when I became a teacher, going back to school. I thought I was done with school, but I remember being kind of 3/4 of the year in. That was my last year as a 4th grade teacher. And, you know, we're 3/4 of the way in. What's happening in graduate school? Testing, exams, on top of what's happening as a 4th grade teacher, testing and exams. And so I remember, like, I feel like probably every other day I was getting a venti Starbucks drink to get me through the day. I was waking up at like 4 a.m. to study for class, and trying to make sure that I was there for my kids. And I was like tapped out. And one morning in particular, I called my principal and I was like, I just can't come to work today. I don't know if I could do it. And he's like, McRae, what's wrong with you? You know, you just go sit down somewhere. So I had to do that. But I think the problem with that is I waited until I had no other capacity to do anything else, right? Like, it's that whole illusion of like a volcano where it's like build, 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 build. And then all of a sudden I'm bursting venti Starbucks all over the place because I didn't take time to take care of myself. And so obviously I had a good relationship with my principal. I don't, let me just put this out there as a PSA. I don't condone calling, you know, early in the morning, having a panic attack. That's not where we want to be. However, when you know better, you do better. And so I did sit down with him after the fact, and we talked through it, and we talked through some ways that how I could avoid it, and I'll talk about some of the things that we did, you know, after the fact. But B, I had to sit down and think about things that I needed to do better, so that I'm not at that point where I'm spilling over. And that spills over into school, into home. And it's just not good.
Well, one thing I know about you, because I know you pretty well, is that you do strive for the top. And what I hear is, I see it a lot with our teachers too, right? They don't want to admit that it's too much or there's too much on top. And so you're given this opportunity at work to not be a teacher anymore, take it a step further to school counselor, but the expectation is go back and learn, but keep up the duties of your class teacher. And so that's often what we see with the teachers on our program. They use the opportunity to come, learn, grow, do better for themselves so that they can return home with that expertise. You don't want to admit that you can't cope with all of that. And it's like a full-time job and a full-time job. I was talking to one of our teachers recently, and her husband is completing a master's course at ECU, and she said that every Thursday he is leaving school at lunchtime to drive physically, which for those of you who don't know the geography of that, it's 2.5 to 3 hours drive for a class at ECU, from Durham to ECU for a class. And then driving home again, they have 3 children at home, and then he's high school math and school the next day. And so I laughed because I said, that sounds like burnout right there.
Yes.
But he's very professional, very motivated. He wants to graduate. He wants to better himself. And so what I hear is that it took you to boiling point to say, nope, the top's coming off the volcano. I got to let it all out, which came out in a more stressful way. So learning those things beforehand would be really useful. What about you?
I think what I really liked about that story was the fact that, you know, I guess your principal had set this culture, this atmosphere for you to be able to. So Amy, as you were talking, like some teachers don't want to, you know, admit like, okay, you know, because they feel like, okay, teaching is such a noble profession and I should be able to just be able to teach and reach my students because they have needs, and you know, they want to continue until they pretty much exhaust themselves. But I think another part of that is I love how school leaders are opening up or creating this culture where teachers feel like, I'm about to break down. I need a break. I got to do something. And then you had that relationship with your principal to say, you know what, just take a seat, get yourself together, and then we'll revisit this and what we need to do. So I like this, that story pretty much just kind of shapes for me what is needed for teachers, because like burnout is going to happen,
right.
but it's like they can do things, which I know you're going to go into, but also what are things that schools are doing to help with these situations. I love that.
And honestly, Dante, that relationship building is key, right? Like, I know this is probably a nugget for another day, but, you know, we talk a lot on our team about building relationships with students, but we don't really talk about building relationships with your school leader and other people in the building, because the reality is you can't, you know, do it by yourself.
That's right.
And you sometimes, I think, as a classroom teacher, you're in this room by yourself, and a lot of us hold these high expectations for ourselves and feel like we gotta figure it out. It's on us. These are my kids. You know, I gotta do it. But you should be able to rely on those around you.
Yeah.
But the only way that that's going to happen is if you've built a relationship and a culture of that. And some school leaders are better than others, right? Like, we know that, you know, you get what you get. You're not always, you can't pick and choose. However, I think there are still ways you can build those relationships with them too, so that they do know you and understand and can kind of tap in and out when needed to help.
One thing I was thinking about, and I think it's probably really true to you in your school counselor experience, like, we deal with a lot when we're teachers emotionally. Like, we think about our own mental health, but you know, it's a very empathetic role, right? You've got your kids and they all come from different backgrounds. Their stories, right? Their situations. And I imagine as a school counselor, you're hearing a lot of the negative stuff. Sometimes those stories can start to take a toll on your mental health indirectly, because you care, right? Care about those kids, care about their families, care about what's going on. And I was just thinking that is another way I see burnout kind of creeping in.
Absolutely.
Because we all just get to that cognitive overload part where the empathy we're feeling for, and we feel the same way kind of now with our teachers, right? We kind of take on their stories, we take on their experiences. And there's some days I just go home and I'm like, it's just a heavy day. And it's only because you're kind of caring for those around you. Is that kind of true to some of the feeling of burnout you had?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's interesting. Part of the reason why I wanted to become a counselor was because I enjoyed talking to they were scholars, my scholars back then. And I felt like I want to spend more time talking to y'all than I do, you know, on EOGs. Now, don't get it twisted. We performed on EOGs because we needed to. But, you know, that was a huge part of why I went into that profession. But you become a counselor, and it's like, it's interesting because it's like what gravitated me towards this profession is also very much burning me out. In that, what you're saying, Amy, you know, many educators, I do think, naturally are empaths, right? Like, we feel for our students or scholars, we feel for their situations, and we want to work and strive to make it better. But when you're sitting there and you're listening to this 9-year-old go into significant detail about these horrible situations happening in their house, or, you know, you are constantly surrounded by like just negative situation after negative situation, or you're in these parent meetings and trying to help people resolve systemic issues that, you know, you can only really dabble in, it does start to weigh on you. And that superpower of being an empath sometimes feels sort of like a burden. And I think it takes a conscious effort to be able to separate. And I know people say, like, you should keep work at work, but the reality is, like, we're humans, right? And so sometimes it is very much hard to separate the two, but I think you have to develop some strategies that really work for you. And I think every strategy is really not going to work for every person, right? Like, Amy, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You know, it's not my podcast, but I have a question for you.
I'm here for it.
You know, I know a little bit about your experience, but I can imagine, you know, during your process with coming to the U.S. From Ireland, I'm sure there were some challenges there. Were there times where you felt like you burnt out, or you had to navigate situations like that too?
Yeah, I mean, part of the cultural overload. You're kind of dealing with the communication and learning to communicate with other people. And then you're establishing a new life and a new personal life and a professional life. And I also, like you, I called you out earlier, I want to strive for the top. So you don't want to admit this is really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that burnout came pretty close. We tell our teachers to expect it around November when they first arrive. And, there's a lot of tears. You laughed and said you called your principal crying. I think Star talked a couple of weeks about. I remember that one staff meeting where you just cried.
She called you out on that one.
She did call me out on that.
But relationship.
I just didn't know how else to cope. It was just like emotional overdrive, and I think that happens because we do that job to try to. And so we live and we learn, like we said, and I think that's a perfect segue into our next section where we'll talk about some practical ways to overcome. So I think we identified burnout. Yeah. What does it look like? Mm-hmm. I think if we're all being truthful with ourselves, we've all probably been there sometime in our career.
A couple times.
We got to find a way back, though, right? Mm-hmm. Can't just stay there.
Right.
I mean, we can't just quit our jobs every other week as much as we would like to and pick up a new one. We've got to find ways to get through those challenging things. And so you said it in the first segment. I think I said too, generally, once you've been through the experience, you look back, you reflect, and then you're like, oh, this is what I would have done, or this is how I could have handled this better, or not got to that volcano explosion. So, Ashley, have you got any advice for our listeners, if you were maybe even talking to your former self, about kind of overcoming some burnout, some practical things to implement or try?
I think one thing that I've adopted is a saying, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Mm-hmm. Like, as much as I want to help other people, as much as I want to continue to support other people, I can't do that if I'm not pouring into myself. I think the hard part is figuring out, well, what do I like to do? What helps me to feel like my cup is full? And I guess to your point, that looks different for everybody. For me, it looks like spending quiet time in the morning. With a cup of coffee. I know not everybody's a coffee drinker, but I like a good cup of coffee. I think it also looks like spending some time filling my brain with things that are going to inspire me. So I'm very much a visual person, and I also am sensory in that I'm taking in things from my environment. So I try to surround my environments with positivity. So if you come to my house, I have plants. I might have a lot of inspirational sayings, but things that are going to, something that I can quickly look at that's going to kind of fill me. And I also like to just spend time by myself. Mm-hmm. I like to have time to think and to process. I love being around people, but sometimes my energy gets low from a whole bunch of social interactions, and I gotta go recharge my battery. And so that helps me a lot. Honestly though, I feel like people always will bring up these topics of like, you should exercise, you should meditate, you should, go outside and see the sunshine. And I think some of those things work for certain people, but it's no like one size fits all model to burnout. Right? Like what helps to fulfill you, Dante, or what helps to fulfill you, Amy, is not going to be the same things that help me to build myself up. And I think, we have to remember that in the field that we're in, when we're supporting teachers too, and it's easy to be like, oh, I'm just going to give so-and-so advice, but so-and-so is very different than me, has a completely different background. And so I think really helping people to understand themselves, to know how to communicate what they want, what they need, kind of helps you get down to the layers of, okay, well, this is what's going to help fill you back up when you're feeling a little depleted.
But, it's not so easy for everybody. Like, I'm just thinking about experiences where, you talked about earlier about how your administrator was very open and you all had a good relationship. That's not everybody's story. Let's be real. So,
that's what I'm sitting over here thinking. I'm like, this is nice, but I can hear a lot of, but I don't have the time. I've got children. I've got this. And actually, my issues are not with me. They're with the fact that there's miscommunication at school because I'm an international teacher and I'm not sure what's happening here. And it's just making me feel like the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like, how do I navigate it that way then.
Absolutely. And I feel like, Amy, I think you said this earlier, right? There is something extra pressure. I'm just going to put this out there on international teachers because you are walking into a classroom where the culture is different from what you're used to.
Right.
So naturally, you're going to have some smile. But that's not okay though, right? It's like that toxic positivity. It's like, you know, that I've read that, I've heard that before. It's like, you know, you're pushing to be so positive, but it's actually being toxic because it's not your true self. So it's like, you know,
we developed a society where everybody just has to be perfect all of the time. It's not okay to just
Well, I'm going to interject because I think there's a difference in being wanting to be perfect and wanting to be positive. I think people often misconstrue the concept of positivity. Positivity is not sunshine and rainbows all the time. I'm not saying you got to walk around with a smile plastered on your face and be fake, because people read through that. Your kids going to read through that immediately.
Absolutely.
And other people will too. And you don't want to come off as being disingenuous, right? However, you do need to work through continuing to change your mindset to a positive one, which really in turn means I'm not ignoring the negativity that is there, right? Because I could have a crap administrator. I could have some silly situations happening at home that are getting on my nerves. You know, maybe I have a heavy schedule because I'm in graduate school, or I got a lot going on, or maybe I just have 3 kids and they have 3 busy schedules. But I can look past the negative and choose to see the good in the situation. Case in point, we had snow last week, right? And what happens when we have snow?
The whole place shuts.
It's a snow day. And a long time ago, snow day would have been a happy thing for me, right? Because, you know, especially before virtual learning, we had a legit day where we could not work. However, snow day looks different for me now. I have 2 little kids and I'm working still. So, you know, instead of me being in a, you know, crappy mood because I still have to work and manage being mom at the same time, I can choose to look past the negative and say, you know what, at least I have a job where I can be home with my kids and make sure that they're in a safe environment. Yes, it's difficult and challenging to manage both. Yes, I might have meetings where somebody's bringing me an applesauce in the middle of the meeting, but things could be a lot worse. And so it is very much choosing a mindset of positivity.
Intentionality.
Yes, instead of me. I'm not saying go around, you know, happy-go-lucky. That's not reality. But you can make a conscious choice to look over negativity and choose the good in the situation. And when it comes to burnout, I think when you're trying to fill your cup, it's making a conscious choice to, 1, do that, choose positivity. But also 2, finding things that help replenish you when you do feel like you are being depleted. And it's not a one-stop shop. It's not going to change overnight. It is something that you have to build and continue to grow in. I think another thing too is just having people around you who you can rely on. Like I talked about my relationship with my administrator, but even just thinking about, you know, other systems in general, like I have a spouse who works sometimes and has to go out of town. We have to develop a system that works for us so that I can manage while he's away and vice versa if needed. And so that is a conscious effort, things we put in place to make sure that we can manage so I'm not being burnt out and overloaded when he's gone, or, you know, the reverse.
You've been listening to our other podcast episodes?
I did
listen to a few.
Talk a lot about most things can be overcome if you just think about your mindset and you develop good relationships with the people around you and create that support network. I think most things are accomplishable. We can overcome a lot. Our minds, our bodies are stronger than you think. But it is about what you're choosing to do for yourself, choosing to do. And I think that's what you were talking about with the self-care. You can't pour from that empty cup. You've got to make an intentional choice to do something for yourself. But then you've also got to make that intentional choice to look past the negativity, look past the things that are around you. And I think you can do that by strengthening up yourself with good, positive people around you, not people who are kind of going to bring you down and wreck that.
In a sense, from all of this, from what I hear, like I'm pulling this phrase of like, it's not about what you're doing, but it's about what you're doing when you're not doing what you're doing in the classroom, right? Like, what are you doing when you're at home? How are you taking care of yourself at home? That's self-care. And like you said, Ashley, everybody's story is not that they go home to a nice quiet house looking upon a lake, you know, as they eat dinner. Right. That's not everybody's story. However, like, what measures are you putting in place to help you?
Absolutely.
You know, but it is an intentional mindset. I have to
That's
do that.
the word, intentional.
It is. And like, I have to sit there and I'm literally journaling, speaking positivity over my day in order for me to practice continuously in that mindset, you know? And I think like we have to put those practical things in place to help us.
One small thing at a time. Like, and it's not like a, you know, I equate it almost to when people, for example, want to lose weight. Like, what do? They go on this crazy crash diet. They start going to the gym 2 a days. And it's like, you cannot maintain that. Like, it's too much. It's not sustainable. It's the same thing with managing burnout. Like, you have to put in place small little bite-sized things that you can keep up with that make sense for your life, right? Like, what you do is going to look different from what I do, but it has to make sense for me in order for me to keep practicing it. Because if I stop, what's going to happen? Venti Starbucks all over the place.
Well, look, we could talk to you all day long about this, and I just want to say thank you for coming and being on our podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I do hope you have learned something new that you can get out there and try and, you know, finish strong. The end of the year is coming. It will be summer before you know it. Keep up the good fight.
Hey everybody, I am here with the, should I say famous Mr. Dalton James. It's hard to get in contact with you.
It can be like that.
You are a busy guy.
Yes.
But, and that's the reason why I wanted to talk to you today, because I felt like you're involved with so much. And with our episode talking about burnout, you are someone that can talk about the feeling of being burnt out, also strategies on how you can overcome that and things you put in place in your life to prevent it from happening. So just talk to us a little bit about all that you have going on in your life and aspirations. What's going on?
I must say I'm happy to be a part of the podcast. I've wanted to be a part of it. I didn't know it would be so soon.
Yeah, see, there you go. Which came true, right?
Yeah. Well, as it regards to my aspirations and what I've been dealing with, it's a lot. It's a mixture of good and bad. I have been dealing with the passing of my mom, transitioning to the doctoral program. It has been a lot, and then I have to balance all of that with my normal work, catering to the needs of the kids. Yeah. So it has been a lot. In fact, even yesterday, I have felt burnt out, so today is a better version of me.
Okay, we cut at you at the right day then, right?
Yes. Definitely.
So you talk about the feeling of being burned out. You felt burnt out yesterday. What were you feeling, and what things did you do? What strategies you put in place? How are you feeling better today? What did you do?
All right, so yesterday after a long day at work, I got home and I just took up my phone and I messaged my friends and I said, who is up to no good? And they were up, so we went to the mall, got some food, we socialized a little bit, walk around, just to decompress. So those are just a little ways that you can, get your headspace cleared.
Yeah, check, like connecting with others.
Yeah.
That is super important. What if you don't have that, though? What if you don't have people in your corner?
All right, so there are times when I would need to decompress when the opportunity doesn't arise for you to actually socialize with your own community. But that's where self-reliance come into play. So you have to find things that you can do. For example, I normally go to the gym. So that is based on me. Or I'll be at home, take a few minutes, catch up on a series, have something,
I love a good series.
Yeah. So just have something to drink, probably, if that's what, whatever works for you in the moment. Yeah.
Would you say that you kind of had to find out, try different things to kind of find out what works for you?
I am naturally a person who depend on my own self. I'm intrinsically motivated.
Gotcha.
So with or without anyone around, I'm going to find a way to get over whatever I have to deal with. And then now, externally, I would go to the gym and I realize that this is something I like. I also realize that it is good to socialize with individuals because just as you are going through something, trust me, they too are going through probably something similar.
That's true.
Or worse, and needed that interaction as well.
When you're talking, the word resilience comes to mind. How do you see that factoring into this, and how do you see yourself being resilient in certain places of your life?
For me, being resilient is not just a yesterday thing. It has been a component that has always been present in my life. Probably it's because of how I was, brought up and the situations that surrounded my upbringing.
Yeah.
I knew that I had to be resilient to be able to be where I am today.
Right.
So in terms of how it factors in now, I just think about the fact that it is not just about me, but there are others depending on me as well.
Do you feel like the teaching part factors into that too, what you're pouring out to your students every day?
Yeah. In fact, last year I concluded it was a rough year, and I thought to myself, I was demotivated. And I said to myself, James, for you to get something out of these kids, you have to pour something into them. And it picked me up from a low part to realize that despite not getting the results that I want from them, that I can still get something. And I started thinking about value added to the kids. Yeah, so that's how it also plays out. Yes, I do believe in preventative methods. In fact, I am a very proactive individual.
Okay.
So I'll try to put things, a structure in place that will help me to cope. So I know at this particular time, for example, on a day like today, I will go home, take a break from whatever, take probably a 2-hour rest. Then when I get up, I'm going to get something to eat, probably watch something, and then I'm going to go probably to assignments. Then after assignments, I'm going to decompress a little bit more, prepare for bed, that kind of thing. So having a structure, time management plan really helps.
Yeah. I love that word structure. Have a routine. Have some discipline. I feel like that's helpful.
And another thing that goes well with the routine is you being flexible as an individual, being able to adjust as different variables come into play or different situations.
Everybody, we are going to have a continuation. We're going to have to invite Mr. Dalton James to the show to kind of expound on that.
Definitely.
You dropped some really good nuggets today. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
And certainly we do your condolences to you and your family for your loss. And thank you for sharing with us today. And hopefully everybody, you were able to gain some things from this short conversation. But like I said, stay tuned. You will hear this voice again. All right. Thank you, Dalton.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Mirrors into Windows. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. It helps us reach more educators just like you.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or any other social media, or visit our website at globalteachingpartners.com. Until next time, I'm Dante Johnson.
And I'm Amy Corwin.